My name is Isabelle Royer, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm so excited to be here with all of you to be able to facilitate this conversation. We've got a great plan for you today to really make the most of our 90 minutes that we have together. I'm a board member of the PFLAG Manhattan Beach South Bay chapter. I'm also the facilitator for our gender expansive group. And so monthly we have 2 support group meetings where we support the community, the LGBTQ plus community at large. We also have a meeting monthly that is a little more specific to the needs of the gender expansive community. The idea is really to be able to meet people exactly where they are, whether they are themselves going through an LGBTQ experience, or if they are a family member that are supporting a loved one. And we really are able to connect with people in the real life that is Zoom, and hopefully in person one day soon, but also via connecting them with resources within the community that are close by. So I'm glad that we have companies such as DESIGNORY to really make space for anyone who's associated with the company to be able to have these types of conversation, to speak more directly to the trans and gender expansive experience, but also all in the intention of creating a more inclusive and welcoming space. We're doing this today because this week, at the end of the week, March 31st, excuse me, is Transgender Day of Visibility, or TDOV as the acronym goes. And TDOV, March 31st, is a global day, and it raises awareness on the transgender people and the transgender experience. And it's a day where we celebrate not only their contributions and all of the elements that encompass their wonderful lives and how they're able to really stand out in the world in the best way, but it also shines a light on still the unfortunate either oppression, violence, poverty, and discrimination that they face. And so it's important that as a community, we really come together to be able to celebrate all of the breakthroughs, as well as stand together to be able to create more inclusive spaces, such as your workspace, a school space, or even just at your local grocery store and in your day-to-day, to be able to really welcome people with open arms as they are. So the conversation that we'll have today is we have an amazing panel of 4 individuals who are here to join us, which I'll introduce in a moment. And really, we're having a conversation about what their experience has been like. Some of them are questions that I'll be asking. We also offer the possibility for any of you to ask questions. You can use the chat function. You can also wave, and we can or raise your hand through Zoom, and we'll be able to take your questions. All right. I also want to preface that if any, at some point, if any of the panelists have a question or something that they don't really want to answer, you can always opt out. You know, this is this conversation is meant to be generated in an as lived kind of way. And sometimes we're inclined to share differently. And so please feel free to opt out or choose to not answer a question. That's totally fine. So, okay, let's get started with our panelists. So our first panelist is from DESIGNORY. Her name is Aggie Eidenberg, and she goes by she, her pronouns. She's been a proofreader on the Chicago QA team at DESIGNORY since July of 2020. And she is also a musician and performs under the moniker A Small Bird. Her work's available to stream anywhere where you get your best music. And she frequently deals with her experience as a sapphic trans woman. So welcome, Aggie. We're so happy to have you as part of our panel today. Next, we have Jackie Maloney. And so Jackie goes by she, her pronouns. Yes, thank you for waving, Jackie. She lives in Manhattan Beach. She's the proud parent of 4 kids And she's always supported the LGBTQ plus community, but after one of her children transitioned a few years back, she and a group of trans kids' moms formed an alliance that's called the Mama Bear Group. And their mission is really to support individuals or support moms and families of trans kids that might be struggling, and to really advocate for equal rights of all trans people and queer people as well. While I'm on the subject of the Mama Bear Group, my co-host today is Cindy Byrne, which she's waving right now. Cindy is the president of the PFLAG Manhattan Beach chapter. She has been my wing woman and co-hostess for many meetings and panels, and she was also part of the Mama Bear Group. Next, we have Catherine Davis. And so Catherine, hi, thanks for waving. Catherine goes by she, her, hers pronouns. And for the past 20 years, Catherine has been a forensic scientist and a litigation consultant in the area of injury biomechanics. Wow, that's a mouthful. Catherine was finally able to transition over 7 years ago. She is active in the community. She's active in volunteer work for the trans community. So she's a board member of PFLAG Manhattan Beach. She is also a volunteer at the Trans Lounge of the Los Angeles LGBT Center. She's the executive director, board member, and founding member of the Trans Chorus of Los Angeles. Catherine really chooses to use her voice in all of its authenticity to really give individuals in the community hope, encouragement, and support so that they can live in their true identity wherever they are on the gender spectrum. So welcome, Catherine. We're happy to have you. Last but not least, we've got Tyler Wild. And so Tyler goes by he, they pronouns, and he proudly identifies as queer, transmasculine, and non-binary. Tyler has taught in an independent high school in Los Angeles for the last decade, and as a middle and high school educator and a current member of the PFLAG Manhattan Beach board, Tyler really creates a safe environment and a more empathetic environment for individuals of any age, but in particular youth, to really feel empowered and confident and safe in their bodies and in their identities. Tyler's also an avid body surfer and an adventure enthusiast. And so we're happy to have you. Thanks for being here, Tyler. So, that is all of our illustrious panel that really will be answering questions and having conversations with regard to some of the things that will come up in today's convo. One of the things that we wanted to do, and I'll start right now, is to share a video with you that will start off our conversation. It's a story of Daniel. So let me just share this with you. And I'll get this started.
In a costume. We didn't know what superhero he was going to be. He was always very mindful, very loving to himself and to others.
My parents would just let me dress myself however I wanted. It can be a not so fun world growing up, being trans my entire life, and to be able to just come home and not have to worry about that as if that didn't exist. It's an amazing feeling. It was normal just to be who I was. It wasn't until being in middle school, I was faced with like, oh, you can't go use certain bathrooms. So I had to use the nurse's bathroom as a locker room. That in itself kind of felt embarrassing because I would have to leave class early. Sometimes I wasn't given the memo of, you know, we're not dressing out today, or maybe the nurse's office was closed, so I couldn't go get my clothes to wash them. So I just, like, my clothes smelled bad sometimes. I already felt like I was different, but like not in a good way sometimes, to the point where I would go in and it's like, I really hope no one makes fun of me today. I hope I don't drink too much water today because I don't want to have to use the bathroom. Right? I hope, you know, it was just mind-boggling. It didn't make sense to me because it's like, I'm a kid and I'm just, you know, this is who I am. What's the problem? I'm not doing anything wrong.
When I first met Daniel and his parents, one of the things that really impressed me is that they really took the time to try and educate the school district about the needs of transgender students, and Daniel in particular. And unfortunately, that all broke down when Daniel was about to get ready to go on an overnight field trip with the school to a science camp. And the school had been consistently saying that he'd have to sleep in a separate cabin with just him and his father, that he could not sleep in a cabin at all with any of his peers. And in fact, that he wasn't even allowed into the cabins that his peers were staying in.
And I did have to go with my dad in a separate dorm. You know, when you're 12 years old and your parents are there when they're not supposed to be, you know, other kids make fun of you. I had a handful of friends that like already knew I was trans and they were cool with it. And I was very encouraged by that until we got to the point where the school was like, no, that's not going to happen. And it was really sad. I remember when my dad, he had told me, like I was crying, like they had to comfort me because I was just furious over that. Like it wasn't fair.
For me, that was so hard to see. And he went into the room and he just wanted to go to sleep. And he wouldn't want to be comforted. He just wanted to be in bed crying. We had to deal with that for the whole weekend. And so it's really hard. And when he came home, you know, one of the things that we gave him home, Danny, we're going to do something about this. You know, it's not going to happen again. It's going to be much better. You're going to see, we're going to get help.
Given that the school district was continuing to single Daniel out because he's transgender, we had no other choice than to file a complaint with the United States Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights and the United States Department of Justice. The role of the federal government in those complaints is to conduct a thorough investigation and determine what happened, and also to determine whether or not the school's conduct qualified as sex discrimination under Title IX.
It made a really big difference for us to go to Daniel's school and to actually see on the ground what he was experiencing on a daily level. So being able to see, you know, where the kids would change before PE, and that he was having to walk across the entire campus and change in a nurse's station. Getting a sense of the way that he was really being singled out and made to feel so different.
About 2 years after the Sanchez family first reached out to me, the federal government announced a resolution agreement.
The settlement agreement that, you know, was years in the making could be boiled down to one sentence: that the Arcadia Unified School District agrees to treat Daniel as a boy in all respects for the remainder of his time in school. And that is the principle that should be applied to all transgender students.
Daniel's case was the very first time that anyone had applied Title IX to protect transgender students in the context of schools. And it was really momentous because it started the Obama administration on the process of developing and ultimately releasing the transgender student guidance in May of 2016.
After the case died down, I would say things were actually pretty normal for me. I was able to just live the normal high school experience, the college experience, focus on like if my grades are good or not, or if I need to like get a job or things like that. It felt very liberating. It felt validating who I am. I'm actually in my last semester of college studying music industry. I'm hoping I can utilize that to make the trans community more prevalent. I'm hoping that, if not myself, I can help other artists be the role model that I needed when I was younger.
Definitely after the case, it was a great satisfaction that we were able to provide exactly what we promised to your child, that it was not empty promises. I realized that it was more about, we need to do this for all our kids, because then you become the parent of the world too. We need to help all these beautiful, wonderful kids that are just trying to survive, to be who they are. If you go back to when your child is still in the womb and you love them and you don't know the gender, you just love them. It doesn't matter. They're still Daniel's still Daniel.
What I would say for trans youth, or really for anyone of the trans community, is that it does get better. I know there were many points in my life where like, this is never going to be over. You know, I'm always going to feel this way about my body. I'm always going to be treated poorly by people. And it honestly, it gets better. What is really important, especially when these things pop up, is to understand how important a support system is and how important it is as trans to just be visible. Those things can be life-changing. We do have people on our side, and we do have people that are willing to fight for us.
When we do kind of impact work, this is what we hope, right? We hope to not only change the way that the law works, that agency, that the federal government understands the law, but that ultimately we're changing hearts and minds, and we're getting folks to understand and realize that supporting transgender kids is in fact good for schools. I think one of the unique aspects of this case is that shortly before this case resolved, the Arcadia Unified School District got a new superintendent, Dr. Van Osdal, and he was critical in implementing all the changes that the school district agreed to resolve this complaint. And since, he's become a national leader in how to include transgender students in schools.
Every time I take a phone call from a superintendent or a board member, staff member across the country, I think of Daniel. Daniel, I think of you advocating for that access and the ability to thrive in a welcoming environment. It should be a basic human right. And I believe you, Daniel, brought that to Arcadia. You opened our eyes, you gave us that tool belt, and we are a better organization, and we are better for students today. Thank you.
There really aren't any words that can explain how happy I am just to know that I have all of your support, just to be where I am. I owe everything, all of my successes, because of the support that I've had from all of you.
Thank you, Asaf, for giving us all that time to go through this whole process and being adamant to continue in pushing and getting this to actually come into fruition. We couldn't have done it without you and NCLR and all the people that were around in that group.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Daniel, it's been an honor to represent you and your family. And one of the great added benefits has been to watch you grow up and to see how you've flourished since the case ended. But one of the even more amazing things is that this case has changed the lives of so many transgender young people across the country. Its impact is far greater than we can know and will benefit trans kids for generations to come.
Well, that definitely is an impactful video. One of the things that I failed to mention when I first introduced myself is one of the big reasons why I do the work that I do on panels or within PFLAG is that I'm the proud mom of two sons, a cisgender 18-year-old and a transgender 21-year-old son. And so had I had attended these types of talks in my corporate job a few years back, it would have been really, really helpful. And so it's an honor for me to be here. And I could definitely relate to the story of Daniel and his family. One of the things that was mentioned in the video at some point was that access and ability to thrive in a welcoming environment is a basic human right. And what I'd like to turn over to our panel is, what does a welcoming environment, whether it be at school, at work, what does that look like for you, or what does it look like for your loved one? Catherine, would you like to go first? Go ahead.
A couple of things. First, excuse me. I just wanted to say that Daniel is a friend of mine, and we both sing in a chorus, and to see him thriving gives me great joy, knowing that, as a transgender, a much younger person than me, that he's able to be comfortable with who he is and to be able to thrive with who he is. I think it's important that we just be treated like everyone else. I think that's the goal of every trans person. In fact, so many trans people live in a stealth position. That is, they don't tell you they're trans. They just pass. They live a normal kind of life in that they're accepted within the community as who they present as. Often, however, that's not the case. And it would just be fine to welcome anyone. Diversity makes our life a wonderful thing. Accept diversity, accept the fact that it can make you grow and develop. And that's really an important aspect of what I see as being who we are. As I said, I'm in a chorus with Daniel, and our motto is to take people in the trans community from victims, who many are, to victorious, and be victorious in their lives. So, it's a very broad question. I'll leave it to others, but just be accepting, be loving, be accepting. I often say there's many questions in our world love is always a good answer.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Who'd like to go next? Tyler, yeah, go right ahead.
Thank you, Isabelle, for having me. And hello, everyone. I'm so happy for y'all to be here. And you being here is part of the way to make an environment safer and more welcoming. I think that, yes, we all want to be treated with respect. There's that, that saying, treat others as you'd like to be treated. And that goes very far. At the same time, I want to be a little bit more specific as far as what I'm looking for and things that I've had to work with the school that I work at to become more welcoming of all folks, but specifically trans people. And so one of the things that we're working on is updating our employee handbook to have more inclusive language, making sure that our policies and procedures are equitably enforced across all genders and all other social and personal identities. And then also too, I know that pronoun usage and email signatures, it's like been really trending as it should be. But at the same time, I think that pronouns are just a very small extension of just general respect, and introducing yourself with pronouns and having those interpersonal relationships with people. I can see who's done their homework, and I can see who is doing their best to be an ally. At the same time, as we go through all these DEI, learnings and, staff developments and et cetera, it doesn't just stop there. I think that what I notice is when I talk to people on campus, my colleagues, I notice when people are doing the extra work, like they're continuing to read, they're continuing to practice. I've been transitioning for a few years now, and I've had medically transitioning for a few years now. And I've definitely had some changes over the course of my 10 years at this same school, and I still get misgendered repeatedly. And it's not because they don't understand me. It's not because I'm presenting as I did in the past. It's probably opposite ends of the spectrum when I first started there. However, I'm seeing that they haven't done the practice. They haven't read up on or just practice with their friends, practice with their colleagues. And so those are the types of things that I think really make an atmosphere more welcoming. It's not just the opportunities for learning. It's not just the email signatures or the policies, which is an important place to start, but it's everybody taking up their own individual cause and becoming a true support network, and not just an ally, but advocating by doing the practice and doing the work.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for the specificity too. It's really helpful. Aggie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, those are two, I feel like those are two like really big pillars. The only thing that sort of I feel like I can contribute is what I think, at least in my experience, because I am not a good representative of any particular group, but like from my perspective, and in my experience, a huge portion of acceptance that we kind of forget about is like anticipation and expectation, because you can say that you are, like willing to work through things and, like willing to make things happen, and that you support things. But ultimately, when you watch like Daniel's video, the thing that's, sticks out is those kinds of solutions of go change in the nurse's office, stay in an entirely different building away from the rest of your class, are ultimately, to me at least, read as not even necessarily malicious decisions, but decisions that were made in an incredibly limited time frame. And they didn't, and those solutions were, I'm going to guess, not thought out until the moment it happened. And it can be scary being, you know, it can be scary being different from everyone else, but the thing that can compound that is to feel like you're different from everyone else and no one else has been different like this in this institution before. It's one thing to be the only trans person at a school or at a company, and it's another thing to feel very concretely that you are the first, like this is a new phenomenon. And that can be reflected just in the things that feel clunky still. And this, you know, and this like applies, you know, this applies to a lot of groups, like even just like, and that's the other thing is that like acceptance for trans people doesn't have to look really, really different from acceptance for other groups. It's just a question of like, is that one of the groups that you're thinking about when you're saying things? The best example in my life is actually not a trans example, but I was at the end of I was studying piano, and at the end of my piano lesson, you know, at the end of taking lessons with that teacher, she suggested that I ask my priest to ask my priest if I can play the church organ, you know, before services, you know, like as a way to keep up my piano. And I just had to be like, okay. And 30 minutes later, she was like, "Are you a Jew?" And I was like, yeah. And, you know, I tried not to make a big fuss out of it, but it was just another question of like, you know, that person was not malicious. That person was not like attempting to, you know, even when she said it like that, that person was not trying to make an anti-Semitic environment. It just was very clear that she just, at no point did it cross her mind that I would, you know, that her student would not be a Christian. Like, not even just like not Jewish. This specific person didn't think that their student would not have a priest. And I run into and you run into things like that as a trans person as well a lot. You run into situations where people they're like doing backflips to even just try to understand what's going on. And you can just tell at no point, like, you know, like they're like, there's a mix up, you're at the wrong place. And it's like, you can't, like, we have, you know, the last name is still the same on these two forms, you know, it's the last thing that people think of still. And it's crazy how, you know, we're like the number 3 to 5 trending news topic on any given week, and it's still the last possible thing people will guess. And so acceptance is really important, and within that, you know, like, you know, expectation and like anticipation and feeling like anyone around you, you know, has thought about this ever before, is a huge part of that, I think, and has been like a major difference for me. You know, like whether on, you know, how many people around me are also trans has been important, but it has been massively overshadowed by like, have the spaces that I'm in ever thought about us being here and what that might entail and why that might cause problems for us.
Yeah, thank you for articulating that, Aggie, in a way where not only are you conveying your experience, but with the other examples that you're giving, it really allows everyone who's in this meeting to you know, walk in your shoes. So thank you for doing it in this way. We appreciate that. Jackie, did you have anything else that you'd like to add?
You know, I was listening to Tyler and saying people trying, and I think that is so important. Like when people actually, you can see them try. And I know that when my son transitioned, and Tyler knows my son who went to an all-girls school, and he identified, I mean, from the outwardly looking and identifying as a male, but still had not declared that he wants to identify as a male yet. Watching him go through the process, I actually was able to watch Tyler go through the process from long hair to short hair, and then becoming their person. And when I had him cut his hair, when I had my salon downtown here, get his haircut from long to short. It was a celebration within the salon for people to see this young man coming into his own. And it touched every single person that was there at the salon that day who knew how he was beginning to identify. And I think they were able to walk away that day and see, wow, like they just weren't educated. They didn't know. A lot of people don't know trans people. So when I think about welcoming, it's like doing the work and going, okay, this is really cool. This is okay. Going to a wedding in Arkansas for the first time, bringing my son home from California, and my uncle is there from Florida. And he just kept saying my son's name over and over and over and over because he knew him as 16 years as the name assigned at birth. But then him making that effort and saying his name over and over, and we were all kind of cracking up, but it was his way of putting the work in and saying, I acknowledge who you are today. And it felt really good. Although politically we don't stand in the same place, he supported this person making their transition. And I think that as a mother of a trans child, obviously, I just want people to honor him as him. Now he wants to be honored as him, no labels, nothing. And I'm hoping that the world we get to that place. And it's interesting that Aggie brings up Judaism. And I remember working in television many, many years ago, 25 years ago. And I was at a Christmas Eve party at a Jewish woman's house. And she said, I'm so glad you came, because I was out here from Arkansas. And she said, someday I hope that there is no Christmas Eve in Judaism. It's just everybody is one. And I think that is the same of sexual identity for me. And everybody is all one. We don't see any of this at some point in life. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jackie. Yeah, and a big part of what we're doing today in coming together, knowing that, statistics will say between little over 7 out of 10 people have never met a trans person, don't know a trans person. They've read it in the news or have heard things. But I often say that even though you are informed and you're open-minded, it's different when it's happening over there and when it's happening in your kitchen. And so that way, that level of really living it in your bones, obviously I'm living it vicariously through the experience of supporting a child who is trans, and yet your experience is different, and it permeates all aspects of your life, as any significant life event would, and in a really profound way. And so it's important to kind of stop and to go, am I assuming? The assumptions are really often what get us in trouble, or the expectations, as we were talking of or speaking to earlier as well, can really get us not in trouble, but really cause harm in a way where we're really disrespecting people or not honoring who they are. So thank you. Is there anyone else that had something to add, something about the video specifically that you felt really either resonated with you, or do we have any questions that have popped up in the chat? And I mean, this is a free-flowing conversation, and so we get to, let me just see right here.
No questions in the chat.
All right. Well, please don't be shy to ask questions, because sometimes 2 things I want to say. In such a large group, and even on Zoom, we have the benefit of anonymity in a way, of like whether we're on camera or not. But here's what I want to say. Your questions are really valid, and we would love to hear them. Secondly, If you feel that you have something to say, but you think it's not important or it's already been covered before, probably not. And there's probably other people who either have that same question or who think that their point is not relevant either. So please really enrich the conversation. This is why we're here. And this is why you've made time. So just keep things coming. One of the things that Aggie spoke about specifically is the idea of being the only one, or being like not the kind of the guinea pig or the pioneer, for lack of a better word, but really the first one to experience something, or the first one to change the way people see things, or that an organization would work. And so what I want to ask our panelists is, do you feel pressure to be the educator or the representative for the trans community or the gender expansive community? And speak a little bit to how that impacts you. Tyler, go ahead.
Well, as the only trans faculty member at my school, I do feel a lot of pressure, especially in the educational environment, to be the sole educator. I'm gonna share a funny story, actually. When I first came out, I think this was back in 2019. Actually, this is the anniversary of it because it's spring break right now for me. And I came out right before spring break. And I sent an email to administration saying, these are my pronouns. I'm coming out as trans. Just thought I'd let you know because I'd like you to use my pronouns. And at the time they were they, them. And they were like, well, I think you should make an announcement to all the employees. I'm like, great, I'll send an email. And they were like, no, we have an all employee meeting. Why don't you just get up in front of everybody and just tell everybody you're trans? Oh my gosh. So I was like, okay, question mark. And so I did. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. However, I boldly went where hopefully not many trans people have to go, and stood in front of all of my colleagues, faculty and staff, and came out in one giant swoop in a giant auditorium. Luckily, I know your faces. Luckily, they clapped and it turned out to be massively okay, thank God. I would have been mortified had it been crickets in there. But when it comes to being the first trans person that worked at the school, not the first trans person at school, because as Jackie mentioned, we did have trans students. But the organization had no idea what to do with me. And they were just like, well, we're so proud of you. And this is a great way to support, yet had no idea how to handle that type of information in a professional way. And so I think that when it comes to being an educator and being the sole faculty member there, I do have a responsibility, yet I don't want to do the emotional labor. So last year we hired a director of equity and inclusivity, and she definitely helps out. But even she was like, hey, I'm not the professional on this. Can you talk to our group? It's called PRISM, which is our kind of like our GSA for our faculty members. Can you talk to our group about the things that you and some students might be experiencing? And it's like, all right, I can, because I care about my students specifically, because I know if my colleagues aren't the best at treating me with the right respects, I'm sure they're messing it up for my students as well. So I do it out of love for them, but it definitely takes a toll and makes it just that much more difficult for me to just do my job. And I'm pretty sure that everybody is experiencing over the last couple of years, it's a lot more challenging just to do your job and show up each day with everything that's going on in the world. So to be responsible for not only just doing the basics of what I need to do every day, but then in addition, hold that space and that emotional labor for not just my students, but for my colleagues as well, it can be really exhausting and frankly, quite unfair.
Thanks, Tyler. Catherine, go ahead.
Let A go first, if that's okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll be short. It's that I was thank you, by the way. It was funny listening to Tyler's story because my version of that is not as severe and also much more anticlimactic because I refused. But when I was talking this out with my mother for the first time, she produced a list of like 50 to 60 people that she thinks I should have one-on-one conversations with, explaining what's going to happen before I like come out publicly. And I was like, no. I was like, why would that be necessary? And she was like, well, what are they gonna, like, how are they gonna feel? What are they gonna do when this comes out? And I'm like, and I was like, I mean, I don't know, but it's, I don't know what I would say to all of them individually, and that's extremely awkward and also probably unnecessary. And this idea that I like, kind of, it's funny because I was almost pushed to just have a ton of individual explanations instead of coming out to everyone at once, kind of the opposite problem. I ultimately didn't end up doing that. I did come out to a few people, obviously, before, like close family, close friends, but really it was, she had a laundry list. I don't even know. I don't even know when she made it, but, I had a second point, but I got lost. Apologies.
Okay. That's okay. We can definitely get back to it. I can go to another panelist and we
Yeah.
can
Yeah, if I think of it, I'll go after Catherine again. Apologies.
But you bring up a really good point, Aggie, in terms of oftentimes those types of lists or that generation or generating all of these objections or sensitivities of others and and you're clearly outnumbered is really one of the things to stop. And to create an inviting and welcoming environment, stopping stuff like that is really important, of catering to everyone else but the person.
I remembered my other point.
Go right ahead.
That was quick. I just want to say, and this is not as specific to my experience, but it is just like something I am more knowledgeable about than most people for obvious reasons, is, we talk a lot about being the first trans person, and often we are a lot of people nowadays are the first person who is openly trans at an institution. And it almost sounds like a cliche, to me at least, because I hear it a lot in my circles, but I feel like not necessarily everyone does all the time, is when people say, I don't know a trans person, I've never met a trans person, there's never been a trans person here. You don't know that, because, and this is there are resources that go into this more and are more knowledgeable about this, like the recent documentary Disclosure about transness in media. For a really long time, there was a very specific, there's a very good reason why a lot of people haven't heard about trans people until relatively recently, and it's because the medical community, a lot of social communities, the federal government did a lot to make sure that people didn't really know that was a thing that happens. Literally, a lot of the guidelines for transition for a long time, especially for male to female transition, was specifically tailored to ensure that people who did transition were undetectable as trans. And so a lot of these institutions have had a number of trans people through them, especially if they're older. It's just that they didn't know, either because the person was a closeted trans person for all of their life or all of their career there, and just was not able to say anything about it because there were no resources and it was dangerous, or because they managed to transition and specifically, the stealth, as I think was defined earlier, like living as your gender, but not disclosing your trans identity, and managing to do that without it being disclosed. Stealth was, for decades, and some might say hundreds of years, a prerequisite of transitioning. And that's, not as much the case anymore. And so you're seeing people who are like, I am transgender. That was not a thing, that wasn't a thing, but there were people who were trans there. They just, were not able either one way or another to disclose it. And I think that's extremely important to keep in mind when we talk about, being the first trans person in places and being the first trans person to do this, and things like that.
Absolutely. And I also was looking at the chat, and one of the things that came up, one participant, Tough, said that, the idea of meeting someone in your close circle, or someone that who's transitioning or who comes out, as a prerequisite to educate yourself, or to put in place some of the practices of pronoun use, or understanding the trans experience, or contemplating your own biases. It's not a prerequisite to have someone close to you knowing a trans person to do that. So thanks for bringing that point out. I'm glad you remembered your second point, Aggie. Thank you. Catherine, want to go next?
Sure. I love hearing the stories, Aggie and Tyler, about your stories. I wish that I had had the opportunity when I was younger to be who I was. When I was, I tried very hard to be the man that I was supposed to be. I've been married twice. I have 4 children. They're all grown now, and I had to tell them that I was trans, which was another story altogether. But I did start to transition in the late 80s and early 90s, and eventually had to stop. I lost my job. I was a dean of a college. I lost my job. I couldn't find another job teaching or anything else. And I had 2 young children that I had to look after. So I had to stop transitioning at that time. Fortunately, things have changed a lot since then. I had a near-death experience in 2011 and realized that I better do something about this or it's going to kill me. And I was with a company. I'd been with them a few years, and I'd been doing consulting for quite a while. And I went to our head of HR, and I knew I had to do what I had to do. And I said, okay, I'm going to transition and come in as female. I'm a trans woman. What can you do to help me go through that process with the company? She was amazing, absolutely amazing. She said, here's what we're going to do. I had a plan. She revised it, got everything in order, who we would talk to first in the company, how we would go through that process. And as with Tyler, she said, we're going to have a person-to-person meeting with everybody there. And I'm going, no, okay, we'll do that eventually. But I felt your trepidation doing that, Tyler. The other thing was, not only did I have to tell the company, I had to tell all my clients. And my clients are all lawyers. And that's a very conservative profession, as most of you know it. And going out and telling them, and my best clients, my top 5 clients, I went to see personally and met with them face to face and told them about what was going to happen. The others, I have a number of others where I get a couple of cases from, but I sent them letters. I lost a whole bunch of business. They just said, oh, we've decided to go a different route, politely trying to tell me they didn't want me as their representative. My best clients stopped sending me stuff. And a year later, I wrote them a letter saying, listen, I understand you have trouble with this, but I want to thank you for all the work that you sent me in the past and all we did. A week later, they sent me 5 new cases and have been bombarding me with new work ever since. The biggest problem, that arose for me, as I said, was with clients. My work was phenomenal. They were, the first day I came in as Catherine, one of my colleagues who I'd done a number of cases with and worked with, saw me. They just happened to be coming by the front door as I walked in. And as soon as I walked in, said, hey, Catherine, how you doing? How's it going today? And walked by like, this is what happens every day. It was the most profound experience. And I've told him that over, that was like, welcome, nothing's changed, get to work kind of thing. And, even though we all know things had changed. So a lot of it, it's different for me. I changed at a much older age. And so I knew who I was, and if things happen, they happen. It's much different when you're younger and when you're going through. When I saw Danny's example, and I've talked to a number of younger people who tried to change, and it's a difficult thing, especially with friends and with children. And just as a final note, my children still call me dad. Because that's who I am to them. I'm still the same person that I always have been. And I get a kick out of it. As I say, we go out to a restaurant and I'll pick up the tab and they'll go, hey, thanks, Dad. And the waitress will look at me. I go, yep, I'm their dad. And it's kind of fun. It does help educate. It shows people that you can be whoever you are and still do the things that you want to do and continue on in that role. And in terms of, I testify in court and trials in front of juries. I've never had any problems. I just go in and testify. And I had one in a deposition, a client, and I said, you're not here about my life. We're here about the plaintiff's life. Let's move on. And I think that you have to handle things in a certain way and do that. So that's how I've looked at it. That's how I've tried to move ahead. I've been blessed and thankful and happy that those things have happened. And I really, in work, to have your work supportive, since I told my HR people, we've developed a really good DEI program. We have very, very great diversity programs within our company. And it's really quite amazing. I'm very excited to be a part of Exponent. So let's thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Tyler, you wanted to add something? And then Jackie, I'll go to you next. Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, Catherine and Aggie, thank you so much for your points. It definitely stirred some more thoughts that came up, and I think conversations with Tuff and Jacqueline as well in the chat. It's one thing, like in the 80s and 90s, I think of Harvey Milk and saying that like everybody needs to come out of the closet, that we have to be visible. We have to let everybody know that we're here. And at the same time, when I'm hearing your story, Catherine, of having to stop transitioning because you couldn't work, we have a huge privilege, especially being in California now, where we have a little bit more security when it comes to our jobs. We can't be discriminated against because of our gender, but that doesn't mean our private clients or whoever else can't necessarily just choose to go with somebody else. Or if you're interviewing, you might get that blanket, well, somebody else got the job and you have no idea why, but you're kind of wondering if it was discrimination. And as Tuff was saying, it's not an obligation to come out. It's not like I owe it to anybody to come out. I'm specifically out because I want to be a visible role model for my students. And that is the only reason. Otherwise, I wouldn't think much else about my identity. I would just go along my life and do my things the way I normally do them. But it's one of those things that this idea of being visible or being the only trans person or just being a beacon of information for those that don't know, yes, it's a responsibility, but it's not an obligation. And I just wanted to re-emphasize that because of what Tuff was saying and because of some of the things that came up. Not only is it not an obligation, but it also can affect our safety, it can affect our job security, and a host of other things that would make life much more difficult. And so coming out is not only a gift to those people that we choose to come out to, but it's also a privilege that we have, that we can come out and do so in a safe manner, those of us that can. And there's plenty of people that cannot.
Yeah. Thank you, Tyler. Jackie, do you want to add something?
Well, I have to be really careful about my choice of words because I'm not transgender. So I don't want to misrepresent the transgender community. But what really resonates with me, all three of you stating that like the obligation of having to represent, because I know my son wants to just be seen as my son. Like there's no labels, there's nothing to it. Just see me as a male. And unfortunately, I think history shows us 20, 30 years ago, and even with the clients that Catherine's talking about, there's still a lot of work to be done of being seen. And then the education component of that question is, do I feel obligated to be an educator? As a mother, it's so in my body. I can't, like, I am like almost, it's that mama bear protective. I had an incident recently in our dog park. I was down at the dog park and letting my dog play, and a little bit older group of people were sitting on a bench, and I overheard them talking, and I got closer and closer, and they talked about, well, you know, this mom let their, I guess, have breast reduction surgery when they were in high school, and, you know, they can change their mind. And they're talking, and he says, as a matter of fact, that, you know, they don't know at 16 if, and I think this was M to F, that he, you know, he talked about the brain not being formed until 25, and he can change his mind, and on and on. And they were all kind of agreeing. And it was one of those moments where I was like, do I say anything? This is a teachable moment for me. And I just took a deep breath and I said, excuse me, guys, I've been listening to your conversation. Do any of you know any trans people? And all of them said no. And I got a little shaky. I took a deep breath and I said, as a mother of a trans child, I want to educate you. And it turned into a 30-minute conversation at the dog park. Thank God they were so receptive to listening to me. And this isn't a choice. This is something that I have witnessed as my child. And as a mother, I have to be protective, but I want to educate you so that you can go forward and be open. And they were so open to what I had to say, and were so welcoming. And another gentleman who came late to the conversation said that he was at Northrop Grumman and had a situation, Catherine, where their top engineer was transitioning. And this was about 15, 20 years ago. And the consensus immediately was, we should let this person go, that we can't, this is a distraction in our company. And he said he put his foot down. They said, why, how do we know it's a distraction unless we let it happen first? I mean, like, wow, I don't understand. This person is still their being. Let them be them. And he's still a great, or she at the time is a great engineer, and ended up, by him standing and being proponent for this to happen, Northrop was able to allow this, and it changed years now of acceptance and things like that. But so, like, education is so, I can't help it as a mother to want to educate people. Being in a gym when, before my son had even been on any hormones treatment, but still was identifying as a male. And I remember in the gym here in Manhattan Beach at the MBYB, and he was playing in a girls' league. And I was behind the opposite team's coach, and he leaned back and he goes, "This isn't fair. He's a dude." My body just wanted to, and my husband was just, states, don't you do anything. Because I was about like, it doesn't matter. Like right now, he's still, so it's really hard. And I would advocate for others, not just my own kids, in this, having been able to witness this firsthand, that I knew that he identified as a male. I knew it from just instinctually. And I hate bringing up color coding, the pinks and the blues, and how we know that this is a social construct today. But I did paint his room baby blue. I knew. And I had stenciled on in his bedroom that said, how wonderful life is now you're in the world. And I didn't know at that time, 20 years ago, he'll be 21 next week, that he opened my world. Although I was in theater and I was around a lot of gay and lesbians, but that he would bring out such a passionate part of me in 16 years later. So that's my education as a parent and as an advocate for our trans community.
Thank you, Jackie. I really appreciate all of your perspectives. And one of the things that I've actually taken from not only what you've spoken to, but conversations that we've had in the past as well, is to really be respectful of the person's rhythm, or what they're willing to divulge or not, or where they're at in terms of, do you want to do a big presentation, or do you want to keep it on the down low? Do you want to have one-on-ones, or do you, and really with the intention of making, when we talk about creating a welcoming environment, it's a welcoming environment that will be that specifically keeps that person in mind and their needs in mind and where they're at in mind, meeting them where they're at versus needing them to be at a stage where they're not, or as we talked about earlier, expectations, keeping those in check as well to make the majority feel comfortable, right? So
well, related to that, there's a question in the chat that's very apropos from Denise, who asks, what's the best, most sensitive way to approach pronouns in a meeting or elsewhere to avoid inadvertently asking someone to out themselves? So that's very much related to what you're saying right now.
absolutely. Thank you, Cindy. Would anyone on the panel like to take that one?
I
Go ahead.
I can take it.
Go ahead, Aggie.
I'll succinctly say that a mandate is not the answer. I've been in situations where disclosing your pronouns is like a requirement, and that has not been great. I mean, it's, it can feel cheesy sometimes, but I think just like, I do think that cis people continuing to volunteer their pronouns just does normalize it and make it not just a trans thing. This is the specific way to approach this topic, I think, is one of the things that there's a lot of disagreement on. And so I definitely will not be, I think Tyler and Catherine might feel slightly differently about it, but I just like, I like when it's offered and normalized. A mandate isn't the answer, and I'll cut it there.
Yeah, thanks, Aggie. Go ahead, Tyler.
I would just like to reemphasize that your pronouns don't necessarily have to do anything with your gender identity. And so your pronouns are your pronouns, and to assume someone is a specific identity or anything because of their pronouns is just that, an assumption. I'll piggyback on Aggie that I always introduce myself with my pronouns, and by doing so first, I typically get that in response. And I would love it if people just normalize introductions, just, hi, this is my name, these are my pronouns, and make it as simple as possible. However, it's a choice for everybody, and some people feel a little hokey. Maybe they think, well, I've never had to do this before. And the reason why is because everybody assumes that if you're cis, then the pronouns align with your cisness, but that may not be the case. And so I think it's a really great way to actually personally just check what feels right for you. I think a lot of times it's never too late to question your own gender, or what feels right. I think what we're doing now, by talking about expression, by talking about gender expression or other expression, by talking about pronouns, it actually opens the door to something that maybe everybody kind of just took for granted. And so you can really use this as an opportunity to express yourself in the way that and have the agency to express yourself in the way that you actually really want to. And that might be the same, maybe nothing changes, but maybe something might. But just to circle back, I think the most important thing here is that pronouns don't equal gender identity. And so we're not, the hole that we fall into is that we assume because you're sharing your pronouns that it has something to do with outing yourself. And that's just an assumption. You can just share your pronouns because that's how you want to be referred to.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Tyler. Catherine, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think that they've covered it well. I don't think that there's any, there shouldn't be any compulsion upon you to be, tell your pronouns. If you want to share them, that's great. I appreciate when people do, but I don't get upset when you don't. And if I see a name, I can use your name just as easily as, using a pronoun. And if I don't know your pronoun, I will use they. It's like if you're in a car, you're driving and someone cut you off and you say to your person beside you, they just cut me off. Yeah, you don't put a gender on who's driving the car. You just say they cut me off. And I think that that's fine to do that. I just want to mention one of the, I don't like the term transgender because I never changed my gender. And I think that gets back to what Tyler was saying. You don't have to tell everybody, you just be who you are and whatever you want. I don't feel like I've changed my gender. I've transitioned, but everybody transitions to their whole life. You get married, that's a transition. You get divorced, that's a transition. You grow your hair long, that's a, we put so much emphasis on gender and it seems, okay, I understand why, but let's look at other things in life too. And so pronouns are just one part of this whole picture. And if you want to use them, that's great. I think that's really cool. If you don't want to use them, that's okay too. That's fine. And I agree with what they said. I don't think there should be a mandate to do that either.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about we're talking about work, but there's also or work or school, but there's also in the periphery of that some of the things that for you, your hobbies, or many of you are artists or creators. How or has the importance of that changed throughout your transition, and if so, how? So really, like, as the creative individuals that you are, how has it not only changed, but maybe also influenced you or been a source of freedom for you? So. You'd like to go first?
I'll go ahead.
Sure thing, Catherine.
Yeah, before I transitioned or changed the way I look, sports were the savior of my life. I played sports. And I played good, sports that I love doing. I've played rugby, football, hockey. I played college level hockey at Penn State. I still have friends from those communities who still, they call me Catherine, they know who I am, and they still are accepting. And I just want to, I was in a fraternity as an undergrad, and my best friends are still my fraternity brothers, and they call me Catherine. So, it just depends on who you are and how you want to do it. They don't see me as anything different, really. I'm still who I was. But for me, that was really life-saving when I was younger. Now I find one of the things that's really dear to me and helps me is music and expressing myself vocally. It's fun when I have a little solo in one of the songs we do, and this older looking woman comes out and sings in the baritone voice, and you see the eyes in the front row go, whoa, what was that? And it's just, who I am. I'm a baritone, and that's how I sing. I love singing, and if you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine. So I think that these kinds of activities away from what our vocation is or even family are very helpful in keeping us vibrant and also keeping us focused on just living and enjoying life and being and normalizing who you are as a human being.
Thanks, Catherine. Tyler?
I just wanted to add to that because I love music. I love arts. I consume a lot, but I was never particularly an artist myself. But when I started transitioning, I joined our community choir at my school, and singing as a baritone. When I started off as an alto, is probably the most euphoric thing, gender euphoric thing I can do, is go and sing as a baritone. It's one of the things that I find most joy in, even though I'm not a good singer, but just being able to hit certain notes, I'm ecstatic about. And you also mentioned sports. I'm a body surfer, and I competed in sports in college as well. I played basketball and was a scholarship player, and sports was a huge part of my life. I can't imagine what it would have been like not to be able to play sports as a kid. And I can't imagine if I'd be where I am now, if even alive, if I didn't have sports as an outlet. And so when it comes to playing sports now, for me, I do compete in body surfing, and it's a gendered sports. There's a men's division and a women's division. And pre-transition, I always felt awkward competing in the women's division. And when I started transitioning, for me, it was much easier because I'm transmasculine, and it seemed much more acceptable just to jump into the men's division. However, our trans siblings that are trans women and trans kids that are trying to compete in women's sports don't have that same ability. And it's and not only do they not have the same ability, they're actively getting banned from playing sports, which is like really life-saving. And I know that's kind of a little bit off topic, but it's something that's really near and dear to my heart. Playing sports and body surfing now, to end on a high note, I don't know if anybody here has had braces, but if you can remember to that time where you took off your braces for the first time ever, and then your mouth is very slippery. When I first got top surgery and body surf for the first time in a pair of Speedos with no wetsuit and no bikini or anything, it felt like the water was like really slippery on my skin, like if you rubbed your tongue over your teeth. And I think everybody can relate to that feeling of just like absolute euphoria, like, oh my God, this is my smile, or oh my gosh, this is my mouth after being caged for so long in metal brackets. And that's how I felt when I was surfing. And so, that joy of sport, whether you're trans, cis, or however you identify, is always going to be there. And it is a human right. And it's something that we should all value as a means of joy. And nobody should be denied that.
Makes you really present in your body and connected, fully connected to who you are and to your source. Jackie, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Just again, because I'm not trans, my son being at University of Washington at UW had just made this year the boxing club, and when there was 130 kids that tried out and his weight, and he called me and he made it, and he was crying, and he said on the boys team, and he said, I made it, Mom, and they don't know. And I said, they don't know what? You made it. So he felt that for the first time in his life, completely validated as a young man to make the boys boxing club. That doesn't mean that I'm not worried about his face when he's in the ring, but it is so important, and they did not know. And he's a much better athlete than some of the assigned gender cis kids that were there. So it is important to have that hobby and to have and to have those kind of things in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Aggie, did you have anything to add?
I'm also a baritone.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean,
we have a trio. Yay.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, it's it is it's been weird. It continues to be weird. I was recording stuff. I was recording vocals this weekend and was getting very frustrated with myself because, you know, I don't always feel like my voice is the best representative of who I am and, you know, like what my music stands for and stuff. And it continues to feel good to know that there are people who have like either not had that problem or come out the other side of it and, you know, not had that kind of you know, not necessarily felt that way or don't feel that way anymore about their voice. And yeah, I've always done music. I played sports because I had to, but I avoided just all general movement of my body pre-transition because it was deeply uncomfortable and it reminded me that it was there. Whereas I just kind of wanted to be wind at that point. Yeah, but I've always done music, and it's been very important to me, you know, throughout my life, but it's definitely taken on new meaning now that I can be fully honest with myself in my music. You know, you know, when you make art and you're closeted, you might feel as anything, you might feel the need to be a little bit vague or not touch on certain things. You know, I certainly, before I was out, when I was still putting out music, was wondering, like, can people tell just from the songs, you know, like how you know how much does that kind of give away? And now that's not a problem. You know, there are still problems, but that is not a problem for me anymore. And I think that is like better for my art. I don't know if that is like necessarily the way that we were supposed to take that question, but yeah, it's just easier to do stuff. It's easier to play sports. It's easier to talk to people. It's easier to live. Like, you know, I can't speak to what transness is like versus being cis because I've never been cis, contrary to some beliefs. But I can definitely say that being out as trans is just it infinitely easier to live than you know, being closeted. And that doesn't just like, you know, people, you know, it doesn't just stem from the like, oh, you know, because some things we talk about, like, oh, you couldn't wear what you wanted to wear, or you have like a, you know, those things, or like names and pronouns, those things kind of up, but it changes everything, like whether you have to constantly be at you know, at odds with everything around you, and also potentially also your body. It changes everything and it dampens everything. It's like braces. It's braces on your social life, it's braces on your mental state, it's braces on you know, it puts a brace on everything. I really think is I guess the point that I'm saying right now. And you know, it doesn't solve all of your problems to come out, but you are just capable of so much more when you are able to acknowledge all parts of yourself and feel acknowledged and be supported in that acknowledgement. It changes everything.
Wow. Well, yes, that's exactly, you answered the question superbly. That's exactly where I'd like to just segue now into the video that from the trans choir. And while I'm setting it up, trans chorus of LA was had the honor of being part of the presidential inauguration. And so there's a short 3-minute video here where you'll see their performance, and you may see someone that you know in there.
Living authentically is not always easy, but it is living victoriously.
With all the voices crying out, we are one. If you're really watching, you'll find a way to see. There's no time to take your name. I may not walk a mile in your shoes. But if we go the distance together, we can prove when you look in your heart and find love. You are victorious. We need love to be who we are. 'Cause love is victorious. Every voice is a voice. And love is victorious. We all have a choice to love. We are victorious. If you ever had a dream, you had to keep inside to live freedom in genuine. At the heart of bravery, there's no giving up. If you're brave enough to love, I may not walk a mile in your shoes. But if we go the distance together, we can prove when you look in your heart and find love. You are victorious. We need love to be who we are. 'Cause love is victorious. Every voice is a voice. And love is victorious. We all have a choice to love. We are victorious. When you look in your heart and find love, you are victorious. We need love to be who we are. 'Cause love is victorious. Every voice is a voice. And love is victorious. We all have a choice to love. We are victorious.
Well, that kind of closes us out and completes our session for today. I want to thank our panelists. I want to also thank DESIGNORY for really creating this space for us to be able to, hopefully bring you not only information, but bring on more conversation that I hope will not only happen at work, but really bring it home and bring it to wherever you go today and for the rest of your week. Transgender Day of Visibility is on the 31st, and just continue the conversation and continue to, treat each and every person that you encounter as the human that they are. So I want to thank you. This will be, as we said before, recorded. It will be on our website. I'm not quite sure, Denise, can you provide information on how it will be available for the DESIGNORY crew?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put it in our intranet, And I think if it's possible, what I'll also do is I can email it out to the folks who are on this call as well.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Well, I'm respectful of your time. Again, thank you so much for having lunch with us, or maybe it's time to go have lunch. We appreciate you on behalf of PFLAG Manhattan Beach, the panel, everyone. Thank you again so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, PFLAG.